Hello, today I'm going to talk to you about meeting dietary needs of guests in the catering world or in the hospitality world. And this is in our safety and sanitation unit. And the reason why it is because you want to be familiar with all the dietary needs of your guests, and you don't want to cross contaminate depending on why the guest has that need. You don't know if it's health, you don't know if it's belief, whatever it may be. You want to make sure you're following the needs and you're eliminating any type of contamination. So, on our first slide, it talks about how do you meet guest needs. Well, there's multiple ways you can meet guest needs, but the number one thing is you need to prepare in advance. And that means you need to educate yourself with the different types of needs ahead of time. So like something like this is really helpful. And the more that you make recipes meeting dietary needs and become familiar with those food products, the easier it becomes to make menus and whatnot to meet different needs. You also want to make sure you're reviewing dietary requirements. So for example, like gluten-free is a dietary requirement. Being diabetic is a dietary requirement. So this screencast is going through like some of the more common ones, but as you're in the hospitality field and you're planning out meals for people and menus, you may come across other ones that you may not have heard of. So you need to make sure that you are reviewing the requirement to making sure you're meeting the needs of each guest. If you don't understand a guest need, you need to ask questions. You need to just, and you could just say, like, what is something that they would want to eat, especially if it's one you've never heard of and there's only one person. You want to plan appealing menus and then always have alternatives. So often you've seen, like in catering one, we would have a buffet meal, and we would have like a variety. We would have meat, we'd have vegetables, and everything was kind of separate. So it was always kind of like a build your own, like think of a taco bar or a pasta bar, but with gluten-free pasta, okay, and things like that. You can collaborate on the registration process. So if you are planning like a party with someone and inviting guests to like the board dinner, they send out invitations. You could have a menu response card. You can send them, if you're inviting them via email you can send them a Google form so that they can kind of let you know if they do have a dietary restriction, and then you can touch base with them from there. And then always budget carefully. Most average menus we always build around a budget and the same way at a hotel. However, when you have dietary needs, especially unique ones, you might only be making that meal for one person, so it's going to make it a little bit more expensive. So always, and if you have 5 people with different types of needs, it's going to be a little bit more pricey. So you want to make sure that not only are you having those menu alternatives, but also within the guest's or the host's budget. All right. So always plan for that. So overall, what's a dietary need? A dietary need or restriction it means that foods are limited dependent upon the person. So they might have a health-related diet, they might be a vegetarian or a vegan, they might have a food allergy or an intolerance, which means their body cannot digest something, or they might have a specific religious belief. So whatever the case may be, you need to plan for all of those, and you need to make sure that you're opening the lines of communication to make sure you understand how to meet the needs of those guests, or else if you plan something and then you get there and then they can't eat it, the host is going to be mad because they're paying for food that no one's going to eat. So it's really important you're understanding the need. Okay, so here's some health-related diets. Some of them you may or may not be familiar with. The first one is a gluten-free diet, which is just eliminating grains and wheat products in the diet. So gluten, which you've heard of when we did catering one and pastry chef, is a protein that's found in wheat products. It gives a substance to carbs. It's in carbs. So they do sell gluten-free flour, so you can still make gluten-free products, baked products, and make them taste really good. They just might be a little bit more expensive. So the first one, gluten-free, that might be a choice. So someone might decide, I am on a gluten-free diet because XYZ. If they eat gluten, it might be fine for them. They just choose not to eat it. And that's their perspective. And it's none of your business whether it's a disease or if they're choosing it. You shouldn't ask that. You should just say they want gluten-free. Okay. The middle disease thing here, or diet, is celiac disease. That means they actually have an intolerance, which means it's an immune disease and their body cannot digest gluten at all. Their body will reject it. And it will, if they eat the gluten, it will damage their small intestines and they'll get very ill. So it's really important that if someone says they're gluten-free, that you are making it gluten-free. All right. And this is where you can ask, okay, oh, you have 8 guests that are gluten-free? No problem. Just so you know, we are not a gluten-free kitchen. You need to make them aware of that because of the celiac disease. If someone has celiac disease, they should probably, and depending on how bad it is, they should not have food that is prepared in a kitchen that has been around gluten. So they actually have like gluten-free bakeries that for people with severe celiac disease that they can purchase. It's just more expensive. So that is a question to ask. And then the last one is diabetes, which you may or may not have heard of. There's different forms of diabetes. We're not going to go into great detail on them, but diabetes is a disease that occurs in your blood glucose, or also known as your blood sugar, and your body just can't process the sugar. So you might be born like that. You might have developed it over the years. There's gestational diabetes that you get when you're pregnant. So typically, someone with diabetes will just need a low sugar diet. They can't have any refined sugar, which just means they can't have like processed sugar, like granulated sugar. So just things to keep in mind. And then the next type of variation or dietary need would be vegetarians. So there is a variety of different types of vegetarians. The first one I'm going to explain is the vegan, which means, so vegetarian, as we all know, it's someone that cannot have, they don't eat meat. A vegan is that's like the main type of vegetarian. They only eat plant-based foods. So all fruits and vegetables, nuts, beans, legumes, things like that. Plant-based diet. Now, when we start getting a little more into it, you'll find vegetarians that still will allow themselves some animal products. So in the top box, it says vegetarian options. So an ovo-vegetarian will have a plant-based diet, plus they'll permit themselves to have eggs. Okay? So you can consider that. A lacto-vegetarian will have a plant-based diet, but they also allow themselves to have dairy. So milk, which comes from a cow, they'll still have that. And then cheeses, because that comes, from milk products. Now, a lot of times you'll see vegetarians that are an ovo-lacto vegetarian. So they're allowing themselves to have a plant-based diet, and then they allow themselves to have eggs and dairy products. But they don't have any form of meat. Okay. So you could, if they say, okay, I want vegetarian options, and it's a breakfast. Okay, is everyone vegetarian? Can we still serve eggs, or is eggs out of the question? Or, if there's only a handful of vegetarians, you have eggs as one of the options. Okay, so just plan for those types of things, just to make sure you're having a food dish that meets the needs of everyone. In the third box down, a pescatarian. This is a vegetarian diet. So all plant-based, but they allow themselves to eat fish. They will not allow themselves to have chicken, beef, pork, etc., but they'll allow themselves to have fish. Okay? And then the last one is a flexitarian, which they primarily will focus on a plant-based diet, but occasionally they'll eat meats. So there are people that are still considered vegetarians, but every once in a while, for the nutrients, or because they want to, they'll allow themselves to have, some chicken or beef, etc. Okay? But they are still, because they focus on that plant-based diet, are considered vegetarians. The next slide is talking about religious dietary restrictions. So some people, it's because of diet that they are, controlling certain things that they put into their stomachs and their bodies. And some people do it because it's their religious beliefs. Whatever the case may be, you shouldn't question it, and you just make a menu that meets their needs. Make sure that there's products that they can eat. And don't lie. Don't say, I don't know. Just make sure you're meeting their need, or it's going to be a huge liability on you and your operation. So there's two main religious dietary restrictions, which is kosher, which is related to the Jewish culture, and they need to eat foods that are blessed by the rabbi and in accordance with Jewish law. That might be a question that you ask U.S. specifics. I'm not familiar with the kosher diet. Let me do some research before I give you options. Or what would you recommend? And then the other culture is the halal culture, which is related following restrictions from the Muslim law. And the main one, food that they avoid is pigs or pork products. So again, when it comes to these restrictions, ask a lot of questions. You may hear them, you may not. It kind of depends on the area that you work in. But these are definitely things that you will come across, and just ask questions when you don't know. And then there's lots of food allergies. So these allergies may not only be triggered by eating the food products, but also by touching, consuming foods that have been prepared by the byproducts, or just being in the presence. So people with peanut allergies, depending on how bad they are, they can't even be in a building that has had peanuts, or use a rubber scraper that has touched peanuts. They will have a reaction. So it's really important that if someone says, okay, we have a peanut allergy, that you make a menu that uses no form of peanuts, okay? Even I would take it to the level of no form of tree nuts. Even though they're different, don't go there. So, and you have to be careful because there's like peanut oil. There's so many things that are in other ingredients. So you need to really make sure you're following it. And if they say they have the allergy, avoid it completely in the whole menu. So if you have a peanut allergy, they cannot have peanuts, peanut butter, peanut oil, anything with those components. Tree nuts are different. Tree nuts are almonds, walnuts, pecans, and hazelnuts, pine nuts. So be familiar with it. There's the shellfish allergy, which we don't often make shellfish, so just keep that in mind. Fish allergy, again, not something common that we prepare, but you know, if you are going into this field, it's important to be aware of it. And then milk and egg allergies. And just ask the severity. Just make sure that you have products that are not, made with milk or with cheese or with eggs, so that those guests can not feel like an outsider eating something different, etc. And then that's all I have for you. So, if you have any questions, ask your teacher. Make sure that you're finished filling out your Google document, and then please submit. Thank you.